And welcome everyone. We should be live. We are live from East London, from Tower Hamlet Cemetery Park. Let me know in the chat that you can hear me properly. Hi Ronnie, hi Catherine, Catherine, hi Janie. So we've got about 11 minutes before to go. So if any of you are watching the replay, if you wanted to go straight into the live walking tour, feel free to skip the next 10 minutes. We'll just be chatting away, getting to know each other and waiting for everyone to connect. And welcome the Attic Girl side. And Satyam is here as well. Welcome Satyam. And Nikki. Happy birthday Nikki, or late birthday. Hi Shaz. Oh, thanks, Nikki. So we've got a few minutes to go. Some of you might know the drill. I want to test the microphone. I've just tapped it 3 times. You should have heard a triple tap. Hi, Sarah. Welcome, Sandrine. Let me know that you've heard it. I'm always a bit worried that there might be a bit of dust in the connections or anything. Now, by the way, we've got 10 minutes before to go. One thing I'd like to address, and you tell me what you think about it. Twice now I've been asked in the chat about gifts, and I didn't really go too deep into it. Well, first, I don't fully understand it anyway, but if any of you are using gifts with any other YouTubers, and if it's something you'd like to use with me, let me know. So if you don't know what those are, the gift, I'm not even sure they apply to the horizontal live streams anyway, but so the gift, YouTube keep asking me if I want to activate them. So far I have not. So to tell you what they are, they're like, basically, let's say you want to put $10 into, most of them are called jewels, but I think you can do coffees or gin and tonic or whatever it might be. So instead of every time you send a tip, putting everything through and your payment and everything, I have you could say, let's say, buy $10 of jewels, and then during the live, give me a ruby. The thing is, 1 ruby is $1 I match you, so you'd have to get me many rubies to make it valuable. But the very reason I've not accepted, it's not because it's a very tiny amount of money. You know, at the end of the day, if you give me 5 rubies, it's still 5p. You know, it's better than nothing. It's just that I believe that because I am using a third-party app, I'm not streaming straight through YouTube. I believe that, oh, they're giving you some free ones, Chas. That's good to know. Maybe I should activate it just to see what it looks like, because I think, well, according to Gemini at least, because I'm using through Prism Live, the little pop-up might actually be stuck into the replay video. If I was YouTubing straight from YouTube, then they'll disappear when you watch the replay. And I think it might be a bit distractive if you're watching the replay to have some little pop-ups for 1 cent all the time. But you know what, maybe I should try it. Maybe, because even if, quite frankly, it doesn't look like much money at all, maybe, even if it's just 1 ruby, in terms of YouTube algorithms, that would count as engagement, and the more engagement, the more visibility, you know. So maybe I should try. Let me know what you think. Let me know if you've ever used those gifts with any other YouTubers. But if they're giving you some free ones to try, maybe I should just activate it, you know, and see what happens. Yes, the hypes, Ronnie, I should have them as well, but you cannot hype during a live. You can hype the replay for, I believe, 5 days or something like that. If you ever watch any of my replay and you see the hype button, do click it if you can. That does help a lot with visibility. Well, I believe. But hype are not available in every country yet. For example, I don't think you see them in the Emirates, but they should be visible in the US and in the UK. Anyway, if you've heard of those gifts or if you've used them before, if you'd like to use them with me, let me know. I can always try. And if it's too disturbing for the replay with those little pop-ups, I suppose I can always disable it later on. And maybe it's not going to be kept because Gemini said third-party stream platform like Streamlabs on Prism. It didn't even say for sure, so maybe I should try. Okay, Sandy. Well, you know what? Maybe I should activate it so all of you can give me your free gifts if you don't know what to do with them. Although I'm not 100% sure it is for the landscape lives as well, because you know on YouTube you can also scroll through the vertical feeds. Maybe it's only for the vertical, but you've never heard of them before, might you? Oh, interesting. To be honest, I've not seen them myself. Well, I don't know whether I watch many live streams. I think I've seen them but only on the vertical lives, which to be fair, I hardly ever watch. I just check them out to see what people do and how many people they have and everything. But I never really... I think it's basically a system that they copied out of TikTok. Because on TikTok you've got those jewels and some people, some kids actually get addicted to sending them to their YouTubers and they end up spending a lot of money on their mummy's cards. But I'm not on TikTok anyway, so I don't know much about them either. Right. Let me show you where I am if you want to get a glimpse of the view. We probably already have about 3 minutes to go. So we'll kick off at 6 p.m. precisely, 6 p.m. UK time. Yeah, I think TikTok does pretty much the same, and it's been very successful for them in terms of monetization, so YouTube kind of not copied them, but yeah, kind of really. I suppose it doesn't cost me anything to activate them on C. The thing is, you don't even really know how much you make because it's not 1 cent precisely with 1 ruby. It's it depends on the promotions. It depends on many things. So it's not a precise currency. Right. Let's see what time it is. 2 minutes probably. 3 minutes. 3 minutes to go. So we are in Tower Hamlet Cemetery Park. And if any of you were completely new to me, let us know in the chat. It's always great to see a few new names. And we'll kick off in exactly 3 minutes. So we're going for a walk into the cemetery itself. It's going to be fairly quiet at this time. This one is open 24/7. Although I wouldn't want to come here at night because there's no light whatsoever. And there was a murder once in the cemetery in the evening in August, a couple of years ago. So I wouldn't want to be murdered. Although it wasn't too late, it was like 8:30 p.m. So it probably was a bit bright still. And welcome Tongsikavapak. I probably butchered that, but welcome anyway. Who's the king, Ton? Who do you call the king of Tower Hamlets? Please, no murders today. Well, hopefully no live murders, but I'll tell you about one. Well, two. Yeah. Well, that'll be a bit silly to come and murder me when I'm live, because obviously there'll be a lot of evidence on the internet. So I think they probably should choose another victim. Right, let's see what time it is, because it's been 10 minutes. 1 minute to go, 1 minute before we officially kick off. Let me stand up. I don't even know why I'm silent. I used to stay silent the minute before because I used to cut off the 10 minutes. But now I don't cut them off anymore, so I don't need to be silent. And let's see if it is officially time. Yes, it is officially time to go. So welcome everyone. Welcome to Tower Hamlet Cemetery. And without further ado, let me flip this camera around. We're going for a little walk. Now you might have noticed I was sat on a funny seat. This is actually an outdoor classroom. The cemetery is also used as a nature reserve. So every so often when you have kids coming to study nature or invertebrates or whatever it might be, they might use this little space as a classroom. I've never seen them do it, but it's what it's been made for. So that's quite cool. So Tower Hamlet Cemetery, it dates back to 1841. The first person being buried here was Alfred Gray. He was from Bow. The cemetery used to be called the Bow Cemetery. And it was built as one of the Magnificent Seven. It is, you might have heard of the Magnificent Seven before in many of my tours. We talked about it before. What happened is in Victorian times, by 1830, the population of London had doubled already, thanks to the Industrial Revolution. And a lot of people moved into the capital, and a lot of people died into the capital as well. And those little graveyards just around the local parish churches, they were completely saturated. And they had to find a solution. And the solution came with the creation of those magnificent cemeteries on what was then the outskirts of London. So some of them you've visited in my tours before. We've been to West Norwood, we've been to Kensal Green, we've been to Brompton, of course. Well, I've done a video in Highgate, although I'm not really allowed. So some of those magnificent cemeteries we've seen together. Usually in those cemeteries you see a lot of grand monuments, for sailors or doctors or traders. Here today, we won't focus on the monuments so much, because this Tower Hamlet was, and still today, is the poorest area in London. And a lot of people buried here never had a monument. To give you an idea, in 1860, so 20 years after the opening of the cemetery, you already had 250,000 people buried here, and about 80% of them were actually in communal graves. Pauper's grave, or you've got pauper's grave and you've got communal graves. It's not exactly the same. The communal graves you'd pay, but you'd pay very little, and you'd be mixed with strangers in the same plot, in the same hole, literally. And the pauper's grave, it's when you couldn't pay at all. The local parish would basically cover the cost. So a lot of people are buried here with no monument at all, and they're buried with strangers. So today we'll focus about the people you cannot see, because sometimes we look at the monument. Today we'll talk about a lot of people that we cannot see, but we know they're here somewhere. And we've got a couple of murder victims. One of them, we won't speak too much about her because I don't want to make this tour about Jack the Ripper, really. But we have a lady here that was murdered in December 1888. Well, if indeed she was murdered. Her name was Rose Millet. She was also a sex worker. She's one of the 12 Whitechapel murders, although she was found in Poplar. And she was found on the street, like the Jack the Ripper victims, but the medical reports, the conclusions were quite conflicting. The pathologist wasn't even sure she'd been murdered at all. She had been strangled, but he claimed that she might have maybe done that accidentally to herself with her own items of clothing. I mean, I'm not sure how you can choke on your own apron, but the police chief, CID or whatever you call him, was probably not too keen on having more murders anyway, because it was a bit of a shame on the Met anyway not to have solved the case yet. So it probably was better for him if it was an accident. But some people claim that she probably was a murder victim as well. Her name was actually Catherine, but everyone called her Rose. And she had a child before. Her mother said she did. And the pathologist said, no, she never had a child. So you can kind of question the capacities of the pathologist anyway. So Rose is buried here somewhere. But she's not really the murder victim I want to tell you about today. Today I want to tell you about Emily Coombs. Emily was a mother of two. She lived in Plaistow. And let me show you the two kids. So this is little Nathanael, 12, and Robert, 13 years old. And would you believe they were the two defendants? They were the two being tried for her murder. Robert was found guilty of stabbing his mother. Now, the boys lived in East London. They had lived in Liverpool for a while. Their dad, Robert Coombs Sr., he worked for the National Steamship Company. In Liverpool, he would work on boats, taking migrants to the US and Canada. And then eventually, when he moved on to London, look at the tree, it's literally growing out of the grave here. When he moved on to London, he took a job at the docks over here, on the steamship themselves, and he was taking cattle to America. At the time, it was actually cheaper to transport the animals alive because they didn't have much fridges on everything. So he'd be at sea for weeks and weeks. He usually, when he went away, he would give a bit of money to his wife, Emily, to survive for the few weeks when he was away. And that's how they lived. Now, that time, Robert Sr. went on a boat again. He went down, he was on his way to, I think, New York. And, one night, Robert, so the 13 years old, was actually sleeping with his mum in the same bed when Daddy was away, which is a bit odd. They were not rich, but they were not the poorest of the East End. They had their own house on Cave Road, and Robert, although they had some space, he slept with Mummy. That night, in the middle of the night, he had gone to buy a knife with his little brother in the intention of killing his mother. On that night, he did. He stabbed his mum. He stayed with her, next to her on the bed. In the morning, he went to tell his little brother, Natty, what he'd done. Natty did not believe him at first, so he came into the bedroom. The mother was still struggling for her life. Guess what the boys did? They left her there. They went to a cricket ground to see a cricket game. Welcome, Anna Jones, and welcome everyone that just joined. Now, we are in 1894. Those boys, they grew up in the shadow of Jack the Ripper, really. They would read the illustrated police news like anybody else. They would read those penny dreadfuls. Actually, little Robert really loved those penny dreadfuls. If you don't know about those penny dreadfuls, they were those very cheap type of literature that you'd buy for a penny. They were often inspired of real murders, but they were fictional. And Robert was very keen on. We could see really that he had some very dark interest, because a year earlier, so when he was 12 years old, he had run away. Well, the boys had run away a few times, so you can start to question the condition at home as well. We do believe that their mother was violent with them. At least that's what they claim at court. But, it's hard to tell the extent of the abuse because at the time it was normal for mothers or daddies to hit their boys, nowadays those boys would be taken away by social services, but there was nothing of the sort yet. Well, it was starting with Thomas Barnardo. We'll talk about Barnardo in a moment. So yeah, the mother might have been a bit violent. Actually, the boys claimed that she had been violent with little Natty that evening. Hi, Mark, and welcome everyone that just joined. So whether they were abused or not, that's a story we cannot fully comprehend. But anyway, little Robert, he had escaped a year earlier to go down to the assizes in Chelmsford in Essex to see the trial of James Reed. James Reed, he was the Southern murderer, James Caham Reed. We spoke about him briefly when some of you might remember when I did a live stream in Southern-on-Sea. He was a bigamist. He got caught and he murdered one of his wives. Anyway, the boy, 12 at the time, went all the way down to Essex, partially on foot, partially on a train. He didn't have enough money for the full train ticket, to go and see a murder trial. I mean, you can see he had some interesting or dark interest. Anyway, the boys were there at home in a house with their mom, with their dead mother, because eventually she died on that day. And what they did is they actually went to the docks to go and see a former colleague of their dad, a guy called John Fox. They went to request him. They said their mother had gone to Liverpool and she had asked Fox to come and mind the boys. She would pay them. She'd pay him, yeah. She'd pay him quite a bit of money if he would come on kind of move in for a couple of weeks or whatever time it might be. And she was offering so much money that was better than the docks. So he actually came. He came to stay with them at Cave Road. And John Fox was, he was described, we don't know whether he was diagnosed with any special needs or anything, but he was described as fairly simple-minded. And he came to live with the boys, and the dead body upstairs. We don't know whether he was aware or not, probably not. The boys had locked the bedroom upstairs. They gave Fox some items of clothing from their dad, Robert Sr., and they actually pawned a few items. So they sold some watches and some jewelry to get some money. And they started skipping school, and they went to see cricket, and they had their best life. Then Robert tried to scam their dad's employer. He went down to the docks, to the National Steamship Company, with a letter. He actually gave the letter to Fox, stating that Emily had come into some kind of medical emergency, and they needed an advance on the daddy's wages to pay for the doctor. Now, the guy at the office was like, I'm not giving you anything without a certificate, a medical certificate, because would you believe little Robert had scammed him before? So he was a bit of a character, that boy. He was definitely, he had very, very much of a manipulative personality. So they didn't get any money from that, so they went back to the pawnbroker to pawn some more items. He even published an ad in the newspaper he tried to publish an ad to get a loan with a massive interest rate. And eventually, I'm just gonna wait because there's a plane above us. It's a bit noisy. Eventually, the sister-in-law, so the sister of Robert Sr., another Emily, so Emily Coombs as well, she started to be a bit suspicious because she knocked at the door, no one replied, and eventually one of the neighbors complained so they went to see the sister-in-law to complain of a smell that was coming out of the house on Cave Road, and Emily Coombs decided to come back. She knocked at the door again, and Fox opened the door. Fox was, I think he was 38, so he's a proper adult. She'd never seen Fox before. And she was like, who are you? What are you doing here? Why are you wearing my brother's clothing? And Fox was like, who are you? Go away. And so Emily Coombe, the sister-in-law, started to be very suspicious. And she was like, where is Emily? Fox was like, she went up to Liverpool. There was a funeral. She had to go to collect the inheritance in Liverpool. So Emily, the sister-in-law, was like, that's very fishy. So she came down here. Actually, right down here, there's a street where the grandmother used to live. Literally just meters away from us. So Emily came down to see the grandmother, to confront her, to ask her if there had been a death in the family, if Emily had gone to Liverpool. And the grandmother said, no, not that I'm aware, no one died. So Emily, the sister-in-law, came back. She knocked at the door again. Robert opened the door. Little Natty ran away. He escaped through the window. And Robert is like, oh, what do you want, Auntie Emily? What do you want? And the auntie is like, where is your mother? Robert is like, oh, she's gone to Liverpool. She's gone. She'll be back soon. And Emily, the sister-in-law, was like, no, your mother is in the house. Let me in. And she had actually got the key from the landlord. She went upstairs and they opened the bedroom and they found the body. Apparently that was horrible. The body of poor Emily Coombe, the mother, had been there for over a week. Apologies, it's a bit graphic, but the head had been eaten by vermin. There was maggots everywhere. When they described it at court later on, apparently quite a few people fainted because it was that graphic. Even the police officer, usually the protocol when you find a body is to stay with the body until it's removed. The police officer couldn't bear the smell, he had to come back downstairs. Now, the question was, well, who did it? Robert fairly quickly admitted it. But what about Fox? He was an adult. He'd been living in that house for over a week. Could he really have not smelt anything? Well, eventually at court, they decided he had not. He had a bad sense of smell, and he was a bit. He had a bit of a cold that week. So they eventually, maybe because he was also a bit simple-minded, they eventually acquitted him. He would have been convicted of accessory to murder, but he wasn't. They found that it was indeed Robert. But that little Natty was very much an accomplice. At the time, the age of which you'd be considered fit for trial was 16 for a girl, 14 for a boy. So technically, Robert was a bit young. I don't know why this difference between boys and girls, because actually I would argue that girls usually are a bit more mature as teenagers. But anyway, he was found guilty, but they tried to play insanity. And to be fair, there was probably something. They claimed that he had always had headaches. Obviously, eventually, Robert Coombs, the daddy, came back from sea, and he was shocked to find out what happened, what his kids had done. But yeah, they tried to claim insanity. He was found guilty but insane, and he was sent to Broadmoor Asylum. Broadmoor is a prison asylum. It's for people that have committed horrendous crimes but cannot be considered fit to be tried. He was the youngest in there. With another boy we talked about you might remember when we went in Angel, a boy called Alfred Gamble, a 16 years old that had killed some toddlers in Islington. And little Robert spent 17 years in Broadmoor. When he was released at the age of 30, then he immigrated to Australia. His little brother Natty had joined the Navy. He fought in both World Wars, and then he eventually joined the Australian Navy. And Robert, when he was released, he came on met up with Natty. And he lived the rest of his life in Australia. Now, what's quite interesting is that when he was a much older man in Australia, he had fostered a little boy that suffered from abuse. So maybe hello. Sorry, I've got a little doggy saying hello, jumping on my legs. So another one. And what was I saying? So yeah, he moved when he died in Australia. He had fostered for that boy. So he might have suffered from some terrible abuse when he was young. Maybe that's why he wanted to help another boy. Who knows? We'll probably never know the full story on what really drove him to commit such atrocity. At the time people would say, because in the 1890s, some people at school, some kids were spotted playing Jack the Ripper, would you believe? So it would have been a weird decades for boys to grow up in. But anyway, that is the tragic case of Emily Coombs. And let's move on. Let me show you some little headstones. In this little footpath here, you'll see a lot of the dates. They actually date to the First World War. The headstones are much smaller, but it is with the First World War that people stopped investing so much into massive monumental headstones, because obviously we lost so many people. The soldiers that died abroad were often buried abroad, but of course not everyone was abroad. Some people were here organizing the war effort, and some people just died of natural causes as well during the war down here. Now, there have been a few tragedies in the East End, and there have been a lot of victims of those tragedies buried here. The first one, well, not the first one chronologically, but the first one to mention, because we're talking about the First World War, it is the Silverstone explosion. Now, you know what? I'm not going to give you too many great details about that one today, because I'm hoping to take you there in a couple of weeks. It's not the most exciting part of London, but this way I can show you the Thames barrier. So we'll do a little live stream down there. Now, the Silverstone explosion. It was a factory. In this area in Silvertown, at the time you had a lot of factories and manufacturing of goods. It is said that every single household in the country owned at least one item that was produced in Silvertown. And in the First World War, in 1717 to be precise, one of those factories had been requisitioned to produce TNT. So extremely dangerous. But the government believed it was necessary for the war effort, They were producing 9 tons or 7 tons a day. I mean, it's a massive amount of TNT. And of course, extremely dangerous if you have any type of fire. And to refine the TNT, I think you need to heat it up a bit anyway. So ridiculously dangerous. In normal times, you would have never done that. Because although Silvertown was full of factories, there were also quite a few residential buildings. At least 300 people lived in there. You had 32 schools. Now, I don't want to say that it was lucky, but it could have been far worse. The explosion, so there was a little fire that started and boom, a massive blow. To give you an idea, people felt the blow all the way up to Norfolk. People saw the fire all the way from Guildford Hill in Surrey. People felt it and heard it in the Savoy Hotel on the Strand. So it was huge. There were even some damage on the other side of the river in Woolwich and Charlton. And the fact that it was at 7 p.m. was not a bad thing, because the kids had already left school. Because those 32 schools that were damaged, imagine the catastrophe if the kids were inside. Oh, thanks, Christopher. That's very much appreciated. And also, because it was only 7 p.m., the kids were not in bed yet, because a lot of accommodations, a lot of houses were quite terribly damaged, but mainly the first and second floor. So luckily, a lot of people were still in the parlor, so that probably saved a few lives. You still had 500 people injured. I think 73 died. But horrible explosion. The area was completely ravaged. And they didn't speak much about it in the press because they didn't want, at the time they believed it had to be from the German. They believed it must have been an act of war. They believed it must have been a German spy that did it. So the government didn't want to say much about it in the press. So although the locals knew and everyone felt the blow, they didn't quite realize the extent of it until much later on. People were given compensation eventually, but many years later. So that's the Silvertown explosion. But again, we'll probably talk about that again in a few weeks. It's 50 tons of TNT. Imagine 50 tons. 900 homes were damaged. A lot of people were left homeless. And you might remember we talked about the Salvation Army the other day when we were in Abney Park. Well, Catherine Booth, not the original Catherine Booth, but Catherine Bramwell Booth, the granddaughter of Catherine Booth, she helped a lot with helping those. So the Salvation Army was very much on the job, helping those people that were homeless and everything. Oh, thank you, Janie. That's very much appreciated. Now, there's another disaster where quite a few of the victims are buried here. We talked about that one as well before. We talked about it when we talked about Elizabeth Stride, the third Ripper victim. It is the Princess Alice disaster. The Princess Alice was a ship, a steamer, a paddle steamer that was used on daily trip to Sheerness in Kent. The Princess Alice sadly sank in 1878. What happened is, so those people had gone for a day trip. So you had families and a lot of kids and people courting and a lot of working class Victorians going for a day out in Kent. You had Sheerness, but you had Gravesend as well. In that area, they had the skeleton of a whale, and you had quite a lot of things to see down there. And welcome, Tish. And we don't really know for sure how many people were on board, because what happened is it was an open return. You'd go down to Kent and you could come back at 4:30, 5:30, 6:30. So, and the kids came in for free. So you never really knew exactly how many kids either. And what happened is the Princess Alice was kind of turning a little bit, and on the river came in front of it a massive cargo ship called the Bywood Castle. And they messed up, and the Bywood Castle went right into the Princess Alice. It was literally slit, like cut in the middle, and it sank very quickly. You might remember we talked about it because after that there was a great amount of charity to help the few surviving victims, and Elizabeth Stride pretended to be one of them, when there's absolutely no evidence she was ever on the Princess Alice. Anyway, a lot of people fell into the water. We're talking about 700. Probably about 100 survived. At the time, a lot of people did not know how to swim properly, but on top of that, at the time, the river was still a bit of an open sewer. Although they had already built the Bazalgette sewer, but you had the Beckton sewer plant a bit just above the river. They had dumped a lot of raw sewer in the river. So a lot of people, even the people that survived, often they died of infections in the following days and stuff. And it was absolutely horrendous, because a lot of the victims were found days later all around the river. And of course, at the time, you couldn't really send a WhatsApp to your mate to check if they were on board, or, so it took a long time for families and loved ones to identify the bodies. The bodies that were found on the north bank of the river were kept around here, and some were kept in Charlton on the south bank. And because of all the sewer in the water, those bodies were actually decomposing even quicker than normal. So after a few days, they had to remove the bodies, and they kept only the items of clothing. They numbered them, and you could go and take a look at the clothing and see if you recognized any of your loved ones. But imagine how horrible. And for the people that went for the first few days, imagine having to look at 500 or even 600, we don't know exactly, bloated blue bodies to try to find your loved ones. And sometimes they were so hard to recognize because their face were bloated and blue. And so a terrible, terrible disaster that is not even that famous. I mean, I only came across the story a couple of years ago when I was looking into Elizabeth Stride, when thanks to the book from Hallie Rubenthal, The Five. So it's not even that famous or infamous as a disaster. Maybe some might argue, maybe because of the Titanic, many, many years later, because some could argue that maybe it's because those people were poor. It doesn't have the same impact as Titanic when you have so many rich people dying. But yeah, a terrible tragedy, and a lot of the people that were not identified were buried here. At least those that had been found on the north bank of the river. And so yeah, that's the second tragedy. Now there was another one in 1943. It is the Bethnal Green disaster. Now that is the time when, of course, we are in the middle of the Blitz. The Blitz would literally translate into lighting in German. And the streets of London at night, we were operating the blackouts. So, because they did not want the German aircraft to see where they were bombing, at night, everything had to be dark. People would blacken their windows, and people would stay in the underground at night anyway, or at least whenever there was a siren alarm. And the streets were dark. Even the buses, they would operate, but without lights. So there were a lot of accidents on the streets anyway, because traffic accidents, when you see nothing. And that night, I think it was about 8 p.m. What happened is Bethnal Green Station, tube station, people would go in the underground. If you wanted to see a movie that reflects this period of history very well, there's an old movie. I usually don't like old movies, but this one is very well done. It's called It's a Lovely Day Tomorrow. And you can really see the life in the underground at night. Because, it was wartime and it was scary, but people would still laugh, date, eat, dance, life goes on, even in terrible times. So it was a very good movie. Anyway, that night, what happened is there was a siren. Everyone believed it was a bombing. It was actually anti-aircraft that had been fired, but people believed it was a bombing because the day before the RAF had dropped over 250 bombs on the city of Berlin, so they kind of imagined there'll be retaliations, and everyone heard the sirens, so everyone rushed into the underground at Bethnal Green Station, and there's a lady with a baby that tripped, then another, I think an older gentleman, but then people kept getting in. So that's a phenomenon that can happen. We often call it vertical stacking. Linda, it's called It's a Lovely Day Tomorrow. I did watch it on YouTube, so it's probably available on YouTube. Although I don't know if it's only in the UK or because sometimes on YouTube there are stuff you cannot watch from abroad, but from the UK I think it's on YouTube. It's a Lovely Day Tomorrow. Now, so those people were rushing into the underground. There's a bus, the number 8, that stopped, and a lot of people rushed out to go into the tube. And they were kind of falling on top of one another. And it's terrible because you cannot breathe. I know exactly what it's like because it happened to me at a football game years ago. I was 18, I think. I made the mistake of going to the Marseille stadium to see the Olympique Marseille. And I was in the worst area with the strongest fan. It's called, anyway, it was Virage, it doesn't matter. And what happened is 3 times, one of them was not even a goal, but there were 2 goals when everyone got excited and ran towards the barrier. So I was stuck against the barrier. I was not even fallen down. I was vertical. I was standing, but I had maybe 12 guys right behind me pushing against the barrier, and I couldn't physically move my rib cage. It was ridiculously scary. The third one, I actually dunked down on the floor, so I thought somehow I could breathe on the floor. Anyway, so I know exactly how it could feel, and it's absolutely scary. And my doggy friends are back. And so that's what happened in the tube. And people were basically stacked on top of one another, and many died. Because people kept coming. They didn't realize what was happening, so they kept rushing in and falling on top of one another. I mean, it's been a terrible tragedy. Now we have a monument for it, but at the time there was nothing for many years. Luckily there were not that many kids in London at that point, because some had been sent into the countryside, but 27 men, 84 women and 62 kids, I think, died. We're talking about 173 victims in total. It took 4 hours to remove the bodies, would you believe? And when they removed all those bodies, they found the body of a very infamous pickpocket. He might have kind of used the situation, kind of amplified the panic to be able to steal from people's pockets. Who knows? Now there's a little monument from it's a guy called Harry Pattis, or Pattises, I don't know how you pronounce it, that built it. Let me show you. One day I'll take you to Bethnal Green as well. So it's called Stairways to Heaven. I think it's 2018 that they made it. And it's on YouTube in Canada. Perfect, Wendy. So yeah, that's a lovely monument. It's right next to Bethnal Green Station today. So that's to remember all the victims. Many victims were actually from the Lechmere family. You might remember we talked about Charles Lechmere before, or Charles Cross. He was a Jack the Ripper suspect. He's actually buried here somewhere as well. The Lechmere family, they were a local family. They were in the business of horse meat. You know, at the time, pretty much everyone had a horse. And when those horses got a bit too old, eventually they had to be put down, and the meat was sold for cat food. So that was the family business. Although Lechmere, I think he worked for Pickford Vans, but he's buried here somewhere. Now, to talk about the war again, the Second World War still, the cemetery itself was bombed quite a lot. We used to have a couple of chapels, one for the Church of England and one dissenters. One was down that side, one was down there, but they were bombed. Some of the monuments as well were destroyed. And we also have a little monument here for the victims of the Blitz in general, of the Blitz in Poplar. We're right above Poplar down here. So this monument has been built with some of the bricks that were recovered from the bomb site. So those would be they'd be made from the bricks of homes that have been destroyed. So that's a little monument to many that lost their lives through the Blitz. There's another lady she's not buried here, but a lot of the people she would have helped are buried here. Anna Billing. She was a little Jewish doctor, a lady doctor in 1925. That was quite rare at the time. She was born on Hanbury Street, you know, where Annie Chapman was found. And she was an amazing doctor. She would work in the bomb shelters, and she would help everyone. Even when she got bombed herself, she had a broken leg, she kept helping people and everything. I think she's buried in Israel, but she's helped a lot. And she would treat people, you know, whether they could pay or not, because at the time doctors were not free, of course. And a lot of people would come to the doctor at the very last moment when really they knew they definitely needed it because they had no money. Now, another, I said I was not going to show you too many monuments today, but this one we need to talk about. This is Will Crooks. He was a docker. If you remember my tour in the dock area, we talked about the dockers. That was a very difficult job because they never knew how many ships were going to come in the port that day. So they never knew how much job they were going to be, how much work. And there was a strike, a dock strike in 1889. Will Crooks was one of them, one of the organizers. And him and his wife, Elizabeth, are buried here. He became the first Labour mayor of Poplar. The Labour Party actually fairly recently rediscovered the grave, and they've refreshed it a little bit. So that's why it's nice and clear to read. So a very interesting man that also helped the poor quite a lot. Now, as we briefly mentioned earlier in the pre-tour, there was a murder in here. 4 years ago now, 2022 I think it was. One night, there was a young man, well, not even that young, 50 I think he was, a gentleman from Sri Lanka. He was studying here in London. He was studying to become an accountant. His name was Rashid, and we don't know what he was doing in the cemetery, probably just walking home, when he was out of the blue, out of nowhere, attacked by a complete stranger called Eric Fella, 38 years old stranger with a hammer. He was hit with 12 blows and he lost his life. He had all his family in Sri Lanka. I think he was in a civil partnership with a guy, but it was, as far as we know, it was not a homophobic attack at all. It was just completely random. When the guy, Eric, was arrested, they found a lot of videos on his phone or on his web search history of hammer attacks and stuff. He just basically came out of his house with the idea of murdering a complete stranger. Not that it makes it even worse. I mean, murder is horrible anyway, but no motives whatsoever. Just pure violence, really. So yeah, there have been another crime lately in the cemetery. Someone stole the coffee machine. I saw. I'll show you actually. I saw a little sign. So there's a little cafe on the other side. It's probably a small independent business, a little van, and someone nicked their coffee machine. But I checked online, it's about $2.5 grand for one of those. I don't know whether it's a good idea to steal that for the fifth though, because there's a serial number on everything. So even if they were to sell it online, well, they'll sell it for what 1K? That's good. But those type of coffee machines, you have to. You have to get them sorted with a professional every so often. So you've got a representative of the coffee machine company that comes to your little coffee shop to fix it, because they're all under warranty and everything. So eventually they'll check the serial number and they'll find, they'll find the buyer. They might not find the guilty party, but it's very sad. Imagine the poor staff member that probably just went to the loo. It was at lunchtime apparently, or maybe he just went to buy well, he didn't go to buy a coffee because he works in a coffee, but he probably went to buy a sandwich or anything, and he came back, the coffee machine is gone. So yeah, quite a surprising crime, really. Now, there's another, evil people, but with the cost of living going up and stuff, there's a lot more thieves everywhere. London is definitely not as safe as it used to be, I do a lot of tours by the changing of the guards. Now, the police officers, they lock their bicycles to go to the toilets. I mean, it's a police bicycle. Who's gonna steal a police bicycle? And I can tell you they didn't used to do that before. They would just leave the bike and go for a pee. Now they lock it. So, things have changed a bit in recent years. Anyway, there's another gentleman around here that has helped quite a lot of people. It is Thomas Barnardo. anybody touches your coffee machine, better watch out. Well, I'll know what not to take if I come and visit you, Ronnie. And yeah, Thomas Barnardo, he was born in Ireland in I think 1845. He describes himself as not even a very nice boy. He was a bit naughty when he was young, a bit selfish, he says. And he became a doctor. Well, I think his title was honorary. I don't think he actually graduated as a doctor. But anyway, he wanted to help. He wanted to become a missionary in China. And then he realized there was a lot of poverty right under his nose. So he decided to come here into the East End, and he opened a rag school. The rag school, there were those charity schools for the very poor. You know, at the time, the East End of London was extremely poor. You had a lot of kids that had no shoes. Their mothers were drinking gin. When they had a mother, because of course you had epidemics of cholera and stuff like that. So you had a lot of kids that were orphans as well. Barnardo opened this type of rag school. He had quite a few children himself. He had, I think, 7. One of them suffered from Down syndrome. So he really wanted to help any child, even anyone with special needs. And so he created that school. And one day, there's a little boy that didn't want to go home. And Barnardo was like, "You've got to go, mate. It's time to go." The school was called Hope Place. And little Jim Jarvis, his name was, he was like, "No, I want to stay here, sir." And Barnardo was like, "No, it's time to go home. You cannot stay here." And little Jim was like, "But I've got no home, sir." And Barnardo was a bit curious. He was like, "But where do you sleep then?" Oh, he's like, "I sleep on a roof, sir." And Barnardo was like, would you show me? Would you show me the roof? And he's like, "Okay, sir." And he took Barnardo into a roof. When I say a roof, it's not an attic, it's a proper roof. There was a tiny bit of a shelter, but it was exposed to the elements, where 12 boys slept up there apparently. So that's when Barnardo's decided to open a proper home, you know, like an orphanage for those boys, and he wanted to help all the destitute boys. Now, he obviously had only so many space at first, because at the time the only other option for the boys above the age of 7 was to go to the workhouse. You know, there was nothing else really. Hold on, sorry, I've got some spine in my foot. Bear with me. Probably shouldn't come down here with this type of shoes. I think it's gone. I'm wearing some kind of like fake Birkenstock mules, but in nature it's maybe not the best. Anyway, we'll get back to Barnardo in a little while, but first, I've got an apartment for you. Right there. I've been studying the windows. How much do you think you'd spend if you wanted to buy a 2-bedroom flat here with a lovely view on the headstones? Let me show you the flat. So this is the flat. See, from the balcony you can actually see all the headstones and everything. Well, it's a leasehold, so you never really know how many years are left on the lease, but this looks like a fairly new build, so it's probably quite a few years. How much do you think you'd spend? So that's to buy. A 2-bedroom flat right here. It has to be this one here because I see some flowers on the balcony up there. There's no flowers on the picture, so it has to be the first floor. So how much would you think for a lovely 2-bedroom apartment in East London looking over the beautiful cemetery? You want to live there, Linda? Tish, a little bit less. Although you're not too far, but a bit less. This bit is new. This looks like it was refurbished from being something else. It's probably a listed building down there, but I'm not even sure what it used to be before. But Anna, a bit less. 200,000, Jenny. I wish. Well, even 200,000, I couldn't afford it, but Ronnie, I think you're the closest one so far. Let me show you the answer. Sarah, you're not too far either. It's Ronnie is closer, but you're not too far either. Let me show you. Where are we? There we go. So £575,000, which is, I think, it's quite average for the area, really. Right. Oh, let me show you. So that's how I've heard about the coffee machine. So yeah, I looked it up on Google, and this model is 250k new. Oh, sorry, 2,500 new. So 2.5k. Right, let's go back to talk about Barnardo. So Barnardo had opened the school, Hope School, and then eventually the orphanage, but he had only so many spaces. Look, some headstones are on the floor. It's probably better if they're unstable. You prefer to have them on the floor because you don't want any kids to be playing and then have a headstone fall on them, because we have had at least 3 children dying of exactly that in England alone. Now, Barnardo. So he's got Hope School. He's opened an orphanage, and one day he had a few spaces at the orphanage, so he went down to the Billingsgate Market, the fish market, the old one. It's close between the London Bridge and Tower Bridge on the North Bank. He went down there to tell some boys and girls, if any. I think he had already opened the girl once. Oh, thank you, Linda. That's very much appreciated. He went to tell those boys, guys, I've got an orphanage if you want to come, and a few people accepted, and then there's a boy that came from the back. He's like, me sir, take me sir. And Barnardo was a bit embarrassed because he had already taken enough. He had no more space. So he told the little boy, he said, I'm sorry, mate, but I'm full for now. What's your name? And he said, John Summers, sir. And then people at the back were like, no, we call him Carrots. So Barnardo was like, okay, Carrots, you know what? I've got no space right now, but I'll make some space. Be there next week, next Wednesday, same time. I'll come and get you, and I'll find you a space at the orphanage, okay? And little Carrot said, okay, sir, okay. When Barnardo came back, he heard that little Carrots had died. He had been found dead on a pile of sugar. I don't really know why they have sugar in a fish market, but terribly sad. And that's when Barnardo decided that no kids should be rejected from any of his orphanages. So he had a sign saying that no destitutes would be rejected and stuff. Now, I know the story looks extremely sad, bearing in mind those stories might have been a bit embellished in Barnardo's memoirs and everything, but that's the way it's been told, at least. And Barnardo, by the time of his death, he had already helped over 8,000 kids, and 513 are buried here. Well, 500, and there's a few of Barnardo's kids as well buried here. And they didn't have a monument, of course, because they were extremely poor. There's a lady called Jean Clark. She had been helped herself when she was a child by Barnardo. And she decided to try to raise £10,000 to create a monument for those kids. And it's down here, I'll show you. It's made with Portland stone. Portland stone, it's meant to be a stone that kind of washes itself, or, well, I think it's mainly when it's vertical on the facade, because the monument sadly is a bit dirty now, but it's probably because it's not vertical, so the dirt is not going as well. But anyway, here it is. So that's the monument that was built for those kids. Now, the Barnardo's charity is, of course, a great charity. It still exists today. Camilla, Queen Camilla, the Queen Consort, she's the patron. It used to be Queen Elizabeth II, but she passed on the job to Camilla. You might have heard about the Barnardo's charity when we had the Queen's funerals. You know those little Paddington bears that had been dropped in front of the palace? There were over 1,000 of them. The royal parks, they even had to tell people to stop bringing those bears. Eventually they were washed and they were given to the Barnardo's charity. Now, it was a great charity, but not without controversy. Already at the time, Thomas Barnardo was accused of kidnapping, because not all those kids were actually orphans. Some had parents, but those parents treated them badly, or they were alcoholics, and Barnardo thought he deserved the right to save those kids. He was actually acquitted in, I think, 88 accounts of kidnapping. He said they were philanthropical kidnappings. But yeah, there was that. And he was also accused of staging some before and after photographs. Now, nowadays we're very used to see those photographs, you know, like weight loss program on Facebook or whatever. Back in the day, that was fairly new. So what he would do is he'd take a child before, all ragged and everything, and later on trained for a position. And he was accused of staging them, but to be fair, he worked in charity. He wanted to, he had to get some fundraising, you know. So nowadays it almost seems fairly normal to find ways to be very visual and get people to donate. Oh, thank you, Ronnie. That's very much appreciated. And interestingly, one of the gentlemen that accused Barnardo was also another philanthropist, Frederick Charrington. Charrington was an interesting guy because he was a Jack the Ripper suspect. Not the best one, if you ask me. I mean, the most ridiculous one, really. He was the heir of a brewery, the Charrington Brewery. So he owned a lot of pubs and all that. And one day, he was outside of a pub when he saw a drunken guy being very abusive with his wife, violent and verbally abusing. And that's when Charrington decided to fight alcohol. So he went against his family trade, and he also helped prostitutes a lot by stopping the brothels. He created a system where neighbors could kind of snitch on a building if they suspected a brothel, and that closed on a lot of brothels. Now, why was he a Jack the Ripper suspect? Well, it's actually a ripologist that wrote a book called The Mammoth Book of Jack the Ripper, when he wanted to prove a case. He wanted to prove that it was quite easy to build up a case against any Victorian man, that you could basically accuse anybody of being Jack the Ripper. And he said, okay, well, by closing down all those brothels, he pushed sex workers to soliciting on the streets, and he actually pushed them in the arms of Jack the Ripper. So he's probably the Ripper himself. I mean, it's very far-fetched if you ask me, but yeah, an interesting guy. And he actually is the one that accused Barnardo of faking photographs and stuff. Interestingly, he also accused Catherine Booth of wrongdoing as well. So it was a time when charities kind of accused one another anyway. Now, I did not want to make this tour about Jack the Ripper, but we've got a few Jack the Ripper connections here. As we mentioned earlier, Letchmere is buried here. Let me show you Letchmere. I don't really know the exact location of his grave because there's not much to see. If you want to hear a bit more about Letchmere, there's a guy called Edward Stowe. He's got a YouTube channel called House of Letchmere. He's done a tremendous amount of research into the guy. Now, Letchmere is not my favorite suspect because for me, although he ticks a lot of the boxes, he was not suspected by the police at all at the time, when he was right in front of their eyes. So to say that he's guilty, for me, it's almost undermining the police. You know, of course, at the time, they didn't have great techniques, but they were not dumb. They detectives, you know. So anyway, so that's Lechmere. Obviously, the original photo is the one to the left. The other one is some kind of AI reconstitution. But he's a good suspect because he's the one that found the body of Polly Nichols. So the first victim, the first one of the canonical fives. And he was on his way to work, and he kind of almost kneeled over the body because at first he saw a pile of rags and he was like, yeah, because he could sell them, you know. At the time, any items of clothing would be sold. And then another guy came behind, Henry Paul, I think his name was. So some ripologists today believe that when the other guy arrived, Lechmere was not, well, I say Lechmere, he actually said his name was Charles Cross at the time. He had two names, which is suspicious to say the least. But anyway, yeah, some people believe that when he was in the process of finding Polly, he was not actually in the process of finding her, but in the process of killing her. And that would explain why they didn't see all of the blood quite yet, and they didn't even see the stomach injuries then, because it was extremely fresh. It is possible, and to be fair, he's a good suspect, and he was at least on the site, and he was a local man, and he was, you could build up a case against him, even with some of the other murders, you know, the Whitechapel murders. Even in the case of Rose Milet, the one we just mentioned earlier, he would have the opportunity. He had a Pickford depot thing quite close to the scene. So you could fairly easily blame all of them on him. When some of the other suspects, it's only the canonical five, or sometimes not even. So he's a good suspect. But again, for me, the only thing is that he was right in front of the nose of the police. He was there. He was the first witness. If the police at the time did not suspect him one bit, for me, it's kind of thinking the police was not great at their job, you know. Or maybe they were not great at their job. Who knows? You know, I wasn't there. But yeah, he's a good suspect. Now, there's also another guy that's linked to the Ripper story that's buried here. We're talking about the coffee machine earlier. See the little blue thing? That's the coffee place. Well, they're still open, so they clearly have another machine, I think. But, or maybe they had to buy one, bless them. Anyway, the other guy is Mr. Lusk. Mr. Lusk was the boss of the Whitechapel Vigilante Committee. You know, this organization that had been created to check the streets of Whitechapel. The one that received the famous Dear Boss letter. You know, a lot of those Ripper letters, a lot of them were considered to be hoaxes. With the Dear Boss letter, we're not too sure. A lot of ripologists actually believe it might have been a genuine letter from the Ripper. Who knows? And there's another gentleman that's buried here that's linked to the murder. Let me find the best way to go, because I'm going to have to go into the grassy area. Probably better off going this way. Well, he's one of those people that, I mean, I'm sure he was a great doctor. I'm sure he was a very interesting man. But he's one of those people that are only going to be remembered because of their link to the Ripper story. And I'm just checking where I'm walking, because in the Magnificent Seven, you want to be very careful where you're stepping, because the grounds can be unstable. You might have some pieces of broken monuments, especially this one, because remember, it was bombed through the Second World War. So you have quite a lot of broken monuments everywhere. Now, let's see. Up. I don't know why I never wear proper shoes when I come into a cemetery. Sorry. My cable got stuck into I'll show you. Guilty. That one, she took my microphone cable. Right. Oops. Well done. Sorry. It's a bit overgrown around here. Yes, exactly, George Lusk. Now, let me flip the camera around. And here we are. So this is the grave of Dr. Llewellyn. with Ralph Llewellyn. So this is the man that performed the autopsy on Polly Nichols. So that's why he's remembered. That's it. Interestingly, he actually originally believed that the terrific mutilation to the stomach and the genital, or at least the uterus area and stuff, he originally believed that it had been done before the death, which is unlikely. I mean, we think the Ripper would actually cut their throat first and then do his weirdest fantasies. But yeah, nettles. I actually have some in my shoes. I don't know why I didn't wear some proper shoes. I think I've got some on the top of my feet. So I'm gonna be itching when I go home. Anyway, my fault. I should have been wearing some proper shoes. Now, this is gonna be the end of the tour. Oh, hold on. No, there's another Jack the Ripper connection I didn't tell you about. There's well, whether it's a connection or not, I'll let you be the judge of that. Thomas Barnardo, so the philanthropist we mentioned earlier, he one day he went to Flower on Dean Street. You might remember we went down that way in my Jack the Ripper tour. He went to one of those dust houses. You know, the dust houses, they were those accommodations for the very poor. And he went to speak to some of those ladies that lived in the dust houses because he wanted to write about how it was to raise a kid in there and to have a kid in the dust house and everything. And he ended up in the kitchen in one of those dust houses. And he spoke to some of the ladies. There was a tall lady, a tall brunette that was quite drunk up there in the kitchen, and she said to him, she was quite serious, and she said to him, we are all up to no good. No one cares what becomes of us. If we had helped the life of us years ago, we would have never come to this. Perhaps one of us would be killed next. Now, if indeed it is Elizabeth Stride, Barnardo believes it is Elizabeth Stride, but you know, it could be anyone. Any of those ladies could have been Stride. You know, recollection may vary, let's say, but she was a tall brunette. That's all we know. But if indeed it was Stride, as Barnardo believed, then she was indeed killed next. So that would be very much the irony of it all if he had really met Elizabeth Stride. Although personally, I'm not even convinced that Elizabeth Stride was definitely a Jack the Ripper victim, because she was a bit of a con artist. Well, as we mentioned earlier briefly, you know, she was getting some charity, pretending that she was on the Princess Alice disaster. She had also met an old lady that had lost her eyesight, and she was pretending to be her long-lost sister, getting some money from her as well. She also suffered from syphilis. That's why she had kind of invented the Princess Alice disaster, because her face had been ravaged by the syphilis, and she claimed that she had been kicked by a foot trying to climb over the Duke of Teck. The Duke of Teck, I didn't tell you, that's a second boat that tried to rescue a few of the victims of the Princess Alice disaster. So, you know, she might have had quite a few enemies. You know, she had been lying to a lot of people. She might also have contaminated her husband with syphilis, you know. So, you know, there might be a few people that would have had a motive to eliminate Elizabeth Stride. And apparently the knife was a bit different anyway. So, so who knows? Anyway, let me show you the poor little... that's the tiny little cafe that got their machine stolen. I don't know whether they broke in or if he had left it open, but I mean, it's, you know, it's bad enough to steal from people, but you can see it's a small probably independent little business. So for a little entrepreneur, that's probably a lot of money lost. And if, let's imagine if the staff actually left it open, the insurance might not even cover if they have this type of insurance. So yeah, that's quite bad. Anyway, that's gonna be the end of the tour. Let me know in the chat if you have any questions before I abandon you. If you want to see a bit more of me, next Sunday we're going to Brixton. So we've not been in a while, so that's something to look forward to. Make sure you go and hit the bell if you don't want to miss it. If any of you were completely new to me, make sure you subscribe. It's always great to see a few newbies, but those tours are very easy to miss. So if you subscribe, you should, well, if you click the notification bell, you should be notified when I go live. So that's, and that'll be much appreciated anyway, because it makes me look better in the eyes of YouTube. And so after next week, it's not scheduled yet, but we're gonna go back down to Deptford, and also I wanna take you down to the site of in Silvertown, the site of the explosion. This way we can take a look at the Victoria Dock as well as the London City Airport and the Thames barrier. Some of you might know we have a huge barrier that can protect us in terms of high tide or flood or anything, which is quite a beautiful structure. And so we'll go and take a look at that in the next few weeks. Cool. Thank you guys. Thanks any of you that dropped me a little tip. Obviously, those of you that did it on YouTube, I saw them, but if you drop me a tip on PayPal or buy me a coffee, that's equally appreciated. And thanks, Anna. Thanks, everyone, for coming today. So hopefully I'll see hopefully most of you in Brixton. And thanks, Genevieve. And if not, I'll see you in the next few weeks. And keep an eye at my videos as well. I still need to publish a video. It took me forever because I need to swear because of the video, and it took me a while to find out how much swearing I'm allowed to do. That's giving you a big clue about the crime I'm covering. It's a very sweary crime that you might have seen in a movie a few years ago. Anyway, so take a look at my videos as well, because there's one coming out in the next week at some point. Cool. See you soon, guys. Have a great evening or a great morning, whatever time it is for you, wherever you are in the world. And thanks for joining again today. It's always a pleasure to have so many of you. Bye bye.